right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. Quick updates before we get rolling today. We are going to be announcing our December event shortly. We have a theme of big cats like we do each year. So we're going to talk to some big cat researchers and scientists and conservationists from around the world, places like Asia, Africa, North America, and South America. So keep an eye out for the announcement of those events. Our Darwin 200 is moving right along. The tall ship Oosterschelde is just arriving in Uruguay. So yesterday we did an event with them from the ocean. They had albatross all around the boat. They had their little ROV in the water looking at a new reef system to see if it could be a future marine protected area. And then we connected with the Eden Project in the UK in Cornwall, and they took us through their rainforest biome. They have the largest indoor rainforest in the world. So it was a jam-packed event. Every Thursday, we're hosting them at 9 o'clock Eastern, and we'll probably add some new times soon as well. So today, we are wrapping up the first in our new series with Environment and Climate Change Canada. We're calling it Our Changing Planet, because as many of you know, through climate change and things like biodiversity loss, our planet is changing, and in most cases, it is not for the better. So we are connecting with scientists and researchers and biologists from Environment Climate Change Canada, so they can share their stories and the work they're doing, what they're seeing happening, and what they're doing to look for solutions as well. So today we have Emma Pascoe joining us. She is an environment with ECC, or she's a biologist with ECCC, and she works on saving our amazing wildlife coast to coast through the Species at Risk Act. So let's bring Emma in live with us right now. Hey, Emma, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Emma, where are we getting you from today?
I am calling you from my apartment in Ottawa.
In Ottawa. Very cool. Well, Emma, we have a great group of classrooms hanging out with us today. You are kind of the headliner, I guess, because we had 4 great events earlier in the week, and you're going to wrap up Series 1 for us. So we're so thrilled to have you with us.
I'm super excited to be here. My eyes were lighting up listening to you talk about all those other events. I don't have anything quite as cool for you as big cats or coral reefs, but I've got some info for you guys about what's going on in your own backyard. So hopefully that's something that you'll find pretty cool too.
Absolutely. Well, that's something that we can do, right? We can do things in our backyards, in our communities to help protect our species. So yeah, Emma, if you want to take over for a little bit, I will hide away backstage, and then we'll get into the Q&A action.
Sounds good. So can my presentation go up on screen so I can show some pictures?
Absolutely. If you pop it up nice and full screen, I'll bring it in for us.
Okay. Let's click some buttons.
Oh, yeah, It was backstage. We lost it. But yeah, let's get, if you bring it back.
There we go.
Full screen.
How's this? I always say I'm an ecologist, not a computer scientist, so.
That's okay. I see it loading back there. Let me bring it in. And if you hit
there we go.
Button, we're in business. Perfect.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Shall I get going?
Yeah, absolutely, Emma.
Okay, good stuff. So this is, I've got my title slide up here. Joe introduced me. I'm going to be talking about species at risk in Canada. But I wanted to start off by introducing myself a little bit. Thank you guys so much for coming here to listen. I'm Emma. I work for the Government of Canada in the Environment and Climate Change Department. I love nature. I've always loved nature. I get excited about going for a walk in the forest or along the coast. And it's really cool that I get to make this my whole job. I grew up in Toronto, which is, it's a city. I didn't get out to much nature, but then I went and spent a couple of years living in Victoria, BC. That's the picture at the top there, right on the coast. And down below, that's the Ottawa River. That's where I'm living now. So I spent a lot of time all over Canada, and I think it would be really hard for me to pick a favorite ecosystem or species, which is why I'm so lucky that in my job, I get to work with all of them. So I want to start off by giving you a couple of definitions, because I just used 2 big words, ecosystem and species, and they're going to come up again and again in my presentation. And especially, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page about what a species at risk is. So I've got 2 pictures up here for you. I've got a bird, I think it's a sparrow, I didn't actually look that up, and I've got a dinosaur, and I want you to think for a minute, what are the differences between these 2 pictures? If you guessed you can only see one of them outside your window right now, you would be right. So dinosaurs are no longer here. They are extinct. So an animal that is extinct is one that just it's no longer found in the wild. You won't be able to see it. It's gone past being at risk. It's gone, and we have a whole series of sort of different levels of how at risk something is of extinction. So dinosaurs obviously didn't become extinct because of human activity. Humans weren't around in those days, but it's a really easy example of a very clear difference between an animal that's present, that's here, and an animal that's extinct. So in my job, we're worried about the things that humans can do to cause species to be at risk of going extinct. And we're particularly interested in preserving ecosystems. So an ecosystem, there's species, that's plants or animals. An ecosystem is the whole system, the whole group of all of the different plants and animals, and even things that aren't living, all working together. So I've got another one of my local ecosystems up here along the Ottawa River. There's trees, there's some geese in the background, there's fish under there, there's bugs, there's rocks, there's fallen logs. All of those make up the ecosystem. And ecosystem scientists like me are interested in more than just the individual creatures. We want the system itself to be as healthy as possible. And that usually means that making sure as many species as possible are kind of left to their own devices to be able to thrive. But, there's us humans are also a part of the ecosystem, and sometimes we cause disturbances. And so my job at Environment and Climate Change Canada is figuring out how all of us can work together to make sure that any species who are at risk are given a chance to recover. So we've got a definition of a species, we've got a species at risk, and we've got an ecosystem. It's time for me to dive in, and I want to start off by introducing you to who I would call our celebrities. These are the species who, when you think about a species at risk or in danger or threatened in Canada, these guys are going to be the first ones that pop into your head. And I'll give you a second. And I don't know if teachers running this want to, let your students call out. If somebody said a species at risk in Canada, what's the first example that you think of? Okay, we'll see how everybody went, because the first one that I've got on here is the polar bear. They're cute, they're fluffy, they're majestic, they're grand. Everybody knows about them. They're on all the Coca-Cola advertisements. They stick out their tongues. They have little snouts. And they are dependent on Arctic ecosystems, and a huge part of, or I would say an area that's really strongly being affected by climate change is the Arctic. So that's sort of a really quick example of an ecosystem that's in a threatened state, and a species that is of special concern as a result. Got another one example here for you. These are the orcas. Again, they're majestic, they're beautiful, they're charismatic. I assume a lot of you probably thought, oh yeah, orcas, that's a species in Canada that's at risk. They are really strongly endangered by a lot of threats that humans are causing, boats being a big one. And so we're really focused on helping these species. I should note, to be fair, that Environment and Climate Change Canada only does the land species, and orcas obviously live in the ocean. They're Department of Fisheries and Oceans jurisdiction, but I did actually start my career out as a marine biologist. So, I always like to give a little special shout out to the whales. Got a couple of other creatures on here. I've got the beautiful monarch butterfly. I've got these really cute northern saw-whet owls. And it's so easy to care about these species because they're majestic, they're beautiful, and they're really cute. And if they weren't here, we'd feel pretty sad. So we do have to care about them for sure. And by caring about these species, we're often able to protect a lot of the other species that use the same ecosystem, which is fantastic. But part of my job as a species at risk biologist is taking care of the species that aren't quite as fuzzy or cute. So now I want to introduce you to a couple of less famous celebrities. They're a little bit harder to love, but they're just as important to the ecosystem, and they're just as part of my job and all of our job about taking care of species at risk. First one coming up is a snake. I'll give you a warning in case you're not a snake fan. going to show some cool pictures here, but I don't want you to be afraid of them. I know that they're, in Hollywood movies, they seem really scary. Snakes are also really beautiful. They eat creatures like mice and rats that we would consider pests. You might not think about a snake having a nest like a bird or a den like a bear, but they actually have their own places where they like to be cozy. Those are called hibernaculas, and those are something that are important for us to protect. To introduce the next couple of the next sort of set of species, I've got a fun little riddle for you, because these are also species that we can find in our own backyard that may not be, as cool or majestic as polar bears or orcas, but I think they're pretty neat. So I've got a picture of some bungee jumpers and a picture of some engineers. And you might not believe it, but these guys have a lot of things in common with woodpeckers. So there's a couple of endangered Canadian woodpeckers on here. I've got a red-headed woodpecker. And the reason why I've lined them up with bungee jumpers is because red-headed woodpeckers have this really cool strategy for catching their food called fly catching. So essentially what they do is they're able to, kind of perch on a branch. And when they see an insect hop by, they sort of jump out of midair and swoop, and they're able to kind of catch that insect on the go, which I think is really cool. Williamson sapsuckers are another endangered species of woodpeckers, and they have a really neat kind of engineering strategy to how they eat. So, if you think about a classic woodpecker, you might picture them, poking holes in the tree. You see just like these guys have in this picture, and sort of sticking their beaks in, fishing for the insects that are inside. What Williamson sapsuckers actually do is they make holes in trees that have sap, and they let the sap flow out, and bugs then end up getting stuck to that sap, and they pick the bugs right off of the sap, which I think is really cool. It kind of reminds me of an engineer. So these are, again, some neat species that are of concern. They're, might not be as famous as an orca, but they're every bit as cool in my opinion. And our least favorite celebrities, which are famous, I think that there's people with whom they're their favorite, and I gotta say, I think these guys are pretty great. I've got some moss and lichens up here, and it's my job in Environment Canada to even work hard on making sure that these guys are safe and intact. So for those who have maybe never seen a lichen in person, mosses are, I think if you've gone for a walk in the woods and you see that green fuzzy coating on all the trees and it's really nice and soft, that would be a moss. Lichens are really cool. They're a symbiotic species that it really consists of two living and working together. You've got an algae and you've got a fungus, and they come together and make one organism. I think they're amazing. Lichens are really cool because they are kind of the first to give some indication about what the air quality is like in a place. So we call them an indicator species, which I think is really neat. And again, you might walk right past these on a forest walk or even step on them. But I want to bring your attention to them because these are really neat, cool, fun species that, again, both of these are on our at-risk list. And it's important to think about all of them. So as a reminder, I brought this slide back before, and I'm bringing them back again. I want to remind you guys that all species play a part in the ecosystem. It's really important to make sure that they're all there, whether they're cute, fuzzy, majestic, creepy, tiny, big or small. And there are a lot of things happening in the world lately that make it difficult to preserve these ecosystems. So what can we do? I'm not here to be a downer. I want to tell you a bit about the things that are going on and things that you can do to help species at risk. So the first thing I'll introduce you to is the Species at Risk Act. It is a law. We call it SARA for short. And we actually do have quite a few people named Sarah working in our department, so it adds a little bit of humor to that. So SARA was designed to help species, plants and animals who were struggling. And SARA is a law, so that means that people who hurt a species at risk can get in trouble. And my job is to help implement that law. There are a lot of people at my work who get to go be out and about in the field doing hands-on research. I don't quite do that as often. My job is when a species gets added to the Species at Risk Act list, we call it the SARA list. I'll just keep calling it SARA from now on. We need to put together a recovery document that talks about what the species is, how it lives, what is threatening it to make it go extinct, and then what we can do. So I work in the capital city here. I'm calling you from Ottawa. I'm not an expert on any one species. What I do is I make sure that these documents use the best science and are written in the best way to help others. So again, I'm not in the field as often. You can usually find me right here at my desk. That's my trusty owl Bernard, who sits next to me and helps me out. I don't think he's in the shot, but I won't go messing with the screen. And so a little look into my computer that you just saw the picture of on that last slide. I want to talk to you about what, behind the scenes, what me and my coworkers are actually doing with these recovery documents. So the first question that we ask ourselves is, what is threatening the species? It's the only way that we can help it get back to the state that it was before it was at risk, if we know what it is that's making it be at risk. And so I've got some examples for you. We have this international numbering system that helps us categorize these threats. And then people who are specialists in each of these species decide how strong each threat is to each species. So we've got logging and wood harvesting, which would mean that their habitat isn't there anymore. It's hard to live comfortably if you don't have a habitat at all. Sometimes the species still has their habitat, but there's something in their habitat making them sick. So like pollution or sewage. Sometimes there's nothing really going on in their habitat, but there are some invasive species that aren't really supposed to be there, that have been brought over by humans. This happens a lot on boats. And so that's why I've got an Asian carp as an example here. And what happens is these species who weren't originally part of the ecosystem, if they're a predator, they'll eat everything up with absolutely nothing to stop them, or they mess with the food chain or the ecosystem in some way. And essentially all species have a part to play in the ecosystem, right? If you remember my slide that I brought up a couple times. So if something affects one species, there are pretty good chances that it's going to affect some of the others. So once we figured out what those threats are, we set an objective for that species to reach. We want it to, if it's been declining at a rate of this much, maybe we want it to stay steady. And in order to get it to do that, we come up with some actions that are mostly targeted about stopping those threats. So I've got some pictures that I had my coworkers send me, the ones who are in the field a little bit more often. You can see my coworker Lee's holding a frog. This is a picture of me visiting a national park. So Canada has a really amazing national park and national wildlife area system. And in these areas, it's forbidden to do a lot of activities that could cause harm to the species or the ecosystem. And so it gives them a place to be protected. And I've got a little picture of a road sign down here because a cool piece of research that's come out in the last, maybe 10, 20 years or so, is that it's not just enough to protect the habitat. We need to have a connection in between the habitat. So, all the species are at Park A. There's also Park B, which could be a good habitat for them. Scientists are working on figuring out how to create corridors that are sort of like a pathway to help the species get from point A to point B, which is pretty cool. We can remove invasive species. This is Phragmites. It's a weed. It's really common in Ontario. And there are people whose whole job is just dedicated to going out and pulling these weeds so that ecosystems can remain pristine. We also keep track of how the ecosystem is doing. Once we've, removed threats, it's important to make sure that we know what's there, how those species are doing, where do they go, are they coming back, is our plan working? So this is some of the really cool stuff. I've got another picture of my coworker taking care of a bird. I realized I actually got to do that. This is my presentation from last year, and I actually got to do that this year. So I should remember to update this presentation with a picture of me holding a little bird for next time. Survey plants, where plants and animals are both considered species when it comes to species at risk. These are some of my coworkers holding turtles, which is really fun. And I wanted to make sure that you guys knew that this kind of stuff works. So there's a couple of success stories that have been in the news lately. I've got some links that I can share afterwards if anyone's interested, but I've put up some pictures of a fox and a species of butterfly where scientists have really done the digging to figure out what the threats are. They've bred these species sort of in we call it breeding in captivity, sort of like a zoo sort of thing, and then release them back out into the environment once the environment is ready for them. And for both the swift fox and the mottled dusky wing, as of this year, things are looking pretty good. So there's a lot to worry about, but there are things that work. And that brings me to my final point, which is that, again, all species have a part to play in the ecosystem, including you. We're all a part of the ecosystem, right? We live here in Canada, and there's a lot of things that we can do to help make sure all the creatures in our backyard are doing okay. So the first thing that I recommend is learning more about species that interest you. I've put up a picture of the Species at Risk Registry. You can find it by Googling Canada Species at Risk Registry, and you can read all of these recovery documents. They're a little densely written. A lot of them are more like, reports than a fun storybook. So I recommend checking out your library, and there's lots of stories to read. There's movies. There's really cool initiatives like this, Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, where you can find species that are really interesting to you and learn more about them, because everyone's got their favorite and they're all pretty cool. You can join a community science event. So I've got, again, this link here that can be shared around. And all of those activities that I showed you pictures of my coworkers doing, there are ways for people who don't necessarily have a science degree to get out and help with those, doing cleanups, doing counts. And if it's something that you're interested in, we always welcome people who want to get involved and learn more. If you aren't quite ready to join a community science event, there are some things you can do even with just, your cell phone or your grown-up cell phone or a tablet or something. You can take a walk in the neighborhood with your phone. There's an app called iNaturalist, and it also has a partner that's a little bit more focused on being like flashy and fun. It's called Seek, S-E-E-K. And what it does is it lets you take pictures of species that are in your area, and then it keeps track of them. And scientists will actually use this to make sure that we're, the species are where we think they are. How are they recovering? What do we need to know about them? So that's a picture of a wood duck that I found in my local neighborhood, which is really cool, beautiful species of duck. And that's something that even if you have all you really need is a phone. So I think that's pretty cool. And finally, any small everyday actions that you can do that make the environment a more healthy place are going to help species at risk. If you can remember to recycle, if you can try and use less plastic, if you can keep your cat inside, that's a really big one, because there's some studies that show that cats who are eating birds, we might kind of think, oh, well, it's just one or two. It doesn't make that much of a difference. But there was a really cool study done recently that shows that it does actually add up. That's my brother's cat. And I have absolutely hassled him to keep that cat of his inside. And he doesn't always do it, but he does, keep her on a leash and watch her. And she's got a really fluffy belly. So that was mostly why I wanted to put that picture in there. All right, I'm going to wrap up and leave this slide here as I take your questions, because I want to remind you of our key message, which is that all species play a part in the ecosystem. And I've picked an ocean one here because, again, I am a marine biologist at heart. And also, I think that ocean ecosystems are kind of the most mysterious and magical, because we can't see what these species are doing when we're here on the surface. We got to dig a little deeper. So I hope I've inspired you to dig a little deeper with things that you're interested in. And I'm really excited to hear your questions.
All right, Emma, thank you so much for a great presentation. And thank you for featuring some of the less celebrated species at risk, like our snakes, like our mosses and lichens, because even though we don't notice them or maybe get as excited, they all have important roles to play. And you lose 1, 2, 3 of them, and big things are happening in our ecosystems.
Maybe you'll start noticing them now. Who knows?
All right, excellent. Well, Emma, before we get into some Q&A action, we're going to play a little Kahoot together with some of the classrooms that are joining with us. So let me share my screen really quickly and bring the Kahoot front and center, and then we will go from there. There it is. So Kahoot, www.kahoot.it. Once you get to that website, it is going to ask you for a game pin, which, lucky for everybody, we have right there on the screen, 807-9168. I pulled together a few questions backstage, some true and false, some multiple choice that you should be able to answer if you were paying attention today. Each question you have 20 to 30 seconds to answer. If you get the answer right, you're going to get some points. If you get the answer right and really quickly, you get even more points. If you put that answer in and it is incorrect, well, we've got nothing for you. So you have to put those answers in nice and quick and get them right, of course. We'll give a couple of moments here to get a few groups in. If you have one-to-one devices at your desk, that's amazing. You can join that way. If not, you could have your teacher pop this up at the front of the room and you could shout out your answers to him or her. Okay. So a couple more seconds and we'll get things started. Emma, maybe while we're waiting for a few more groups to join, can you tell me or us why you made the switch from marine biology? What made you kind of change your mind?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I have to say, I don't think that I've fully made the switch. The cool thing about working at Environment Canada is that there's so much going on and so many different things to do and to study that right now I picked this awesome opportunity that I had to get involved specifically with the species at risk recovery team because I think they're amazing. But one day I might switch back to working on ocean ecosystems. Who knows? I'm not sure what the future holds for my career, but it's been I've changed track a couple of times so far, and who knows? My heart is definitely still with the marine world. Although I've been getting really into birds with this job, and I think they're pretty cool also.
All right. Well, we'll give a shout out. The Merlin app is just the coolest app ever.
I think Merlin is magic.
Yeah, you can go out, you can download a bird pack for your area. You can identify them from pictures, but you can also identify them from their sounds. So record their sounds and it'll tell you who you're listening to. And sometimes I've even played the sounds back and the birds have come closer.
Okay. I've tried to imitate the sounds into my phone to see if it'll pick up on that, and it's never worked. But maybe I'm just bad at whistling. So.
All right, fair enough. Well, let's get this going. We have our first question coming up in about 3-second countdown, and then we'll see where we end up. So here we go. First question coming up. The true and false. Some species don't play an important role in an ecosystem. Is that true, or is that false? That some species just don't play an important role in an ecosystem. All right. Well, that was easy. We can see that everybody rolled with false, and that's so true. It may be that if you lose a species, we don't quite notice the difference right away, but everything evolved to be part of that ecosystem. It all plays a role. It's food for someone else. It's keeping population in control. It's giving habitats, adding oxygen. Everything plays an important role in an ecosystem. All right, so the Soaring Goose is in first place. Let's go to our next question. This one is, which isn't an example of a species at risk? So polar bears, raccoons, hognose snake, or monarch butterflies. Which isn't an example of a species at risk? There's a little clue coming in there for you as well as things count down. And let's see here. All right, we did not talk about raccoons. I think anybody can pretty much go outside in their neighborhood, urban, suburban, rural, doesn't matter. And there's lots of those raccoons around.
I probably shouldn't say this, but I kind of wish they'd be a little bit more at risk.
All right. So yes, polar bears, hognose snakes, monarch butterflies are great examples of species at risk. The groovy glider is in first place right now. Another true and false coming your way. Emma started her career as a marine biologist. I like to think that we just had that recently, so I think most of the students are going to jump on that in the classrooms pretty quickly. Emma started her career as a marine biologist. All right. Good job, crew. Absolutely true. And who knows, Emma, maybe you will find yourself back in that field.
I do get really seasick. That is one thing that is hampering me from being a full-time marine biologist.
All right, fair enough. Well, you're in good company. When Darwin first got on the Beagle, he had to overcome his seasickness first as well.
Huh.
Okay, we have another question coming your way. An indicator species is the one that doesn't belong in an ecosystem, an organism that's no longer in an ecosystem, one that tells us things about the health, or a non-living part of an ecosystem. So let's take a look there. Let's get our answers in. An indicator species. What is that telling us about that ecosystem? Okay, that was pretty quick, classrooms. So yes, the answer is it is a species that tells us something about the health of an ecosystem. Maybe there's lots of them. Maybe there's fewer of them and they're disappearing. An indicator species is kind of the canary in the coal mine. And a great example of that is frogs. So frogs are being affected by chytrid fungus. And when we see frogs disappear, changes in the water and things like that, they are an indicator species that something isn't right in that ecosystem. Balanced owl taking that top spot. And we've got one more question to wrap things up. What could cause an animal to become at risk? Loss of habitat, pollution, invasive species, or all of the above? Got a few more seconds to get your answer in. Is it one of those? Is it all of them? What is the best answer for that question? All right. So it is all of the above. I know these kind of questions trick students every time because they see the right one and they click it right away to be fast. But you got to be careful sometimes because loss of habitat, pollution, and invasive species all can have an impact on our species at risk. So the soaring goose is in third place. In second place, we have the groovy glider. And holding down that top spot, we've got the brave panda. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for playing along with us. Let's come back from that screen share. Let's turn off that music. And let's focus the rest of our time on some Q&A action. If you are joining via YouTube, use the chat sidebar. I also see we have a grade 5-6 class backstage, but your devices didn't connect. So if you want to send your questions in through the private chat, I can ask some of those questions for you. I think it's Miss Moffat's crew. And then we've got Mr. Dunn's crew, who I can bring in right away in grade 4 in Sudbury.
Awesome.
All right. Great presentation, Emma. Bihan in my class has a question.
I would love to hear it.
Why are woodpeckers endangered?
Ooh, that's a good question. There are a lot of different woodpeckers. The ones that I showed, let me do a quick think through my little file in my head that I keep of all the species. The woodpeckers that are in BC, a big part of why they're going endangered is a loss of habitat. There are some that rely on old growth forests, and those forests are something that's really commonly open to logging. And so having trees not be available is a really big one. The ones in Ontario, can't quite remember off the top of my head, but it's the loss of habitat is really a big one. Oh, and loss of insects is another big one I think that's what's affecting the ones I think they're all across Canada. We're actually seeing quite a decline in the population numbers of, we call them aerial insectivores. So that's a fancy way of saying aerial flying, insectivores eating insects, so flying creatures who eat insects. Again, with my little joke about the raccoon, we like to joke, oh yeah, fantastic, fewer bugs, hooray. But there are some cases of insect populations going down that are actually causing a lot of trouble for a lot of the different birds and a lot of bats.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up insects because there are new studies coming out to show that they are disappearing in really alarming numbers. And I think Mr. Dunn will probably remember this as well. Growing up, when you'd go for a drive on like a spring or summer night, your car would just be covered in insects because, that there's so many of them. But lately, the last few years, when you're driving in the spring and the summer, it's almost very rare that bugs are hitting your car and windscreen. So you definitely see that the numbers are disappearing through things like that. All right, Mr. Dunn, do we have another one before we move on to a couple more questions from other groups?
Yeah, Max, come on over. Again, something species specific. They seem very curious species that you brought up.
Great.
So,
How is the northern saw-whet owl going extinct?
What are things that are threatening the northern saw-whet owl? Is that the question? It's a really good question, and it's a bit of a stumper for me. I have not looked that one up in a little while. I'm going to give my best educated guess, and then circle back to me so that I can check the recovery strategy and confirm. My guess is that it also has to do with a loss of habitat. Northern saw-whet owls are in trees, and trees often get cut down. But you know what I'm going to do? And this is actually probably a good opportunity here. I'm going to go right onto that species at risk registry website. I'm going to look up northern spotted owl. I'm going to click on that recovery strategy because I wasn't the one who wrote that one. And I'm gonna go look and see what's in that threat thing there. So while I do that and get back to you, that's a really good question. It's fun to stump the presenter, eh?
Well, and I think that's an important thing too, is not everybody can know everything about a field, or, we have so many species, about 2 million named species and potentially millions more. So it is hard to know everything about all the different species. And there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I'm not sure, but we have amazing tools in our pocket, in our classrooms, on our desks at home that can help us fill in some of those blanks.
If you want, I can share my screen on the species registry right now. Can I do that? That would be really cool. All right, let's see.
Yeah, you might have to stop the screen share first, and then you can show us what the registry looks like.
All right, because this is actually a very cool opportunity. So thank you for your very cool question. All right, share screen. I'm going to share a window.
Okay.
How's that?
Perfect.
Are we seeing a Government of Canada website? Alrighty. So this is the Government of Canada Species at Risk Public Registry. And when I'm going down, you've got to see it's purpled out over here because I click on this a lot. I'm going to click on species search. I'm going to go over to the keywords and you'll see I search a lot of species. Northern saw-whet owl. And a fun fact for you guys is I think that these are possibly, where are you there? Oh no, you guys. I was going to say that I think they're possibly the cutest species of owl in existence. We're going to scroll down. We're going to search owl. We're going to do this the old-fashioned way. Alrighty. There we go. Northern saw-whet owl, Brooksii subspecies. So when you click on this species, it gives you a little bit of a summary. Tells you that it's a bird, that it's in British Columbia. It gives you some information about when it was assessed, that it's threatened, some of the reasons why. And if you go over here to documents, you can check out the recovery strategies. This is a bit of an older one. It was published close to 10 years ago. When you open a recovery strategy, so this is why I said it's probably more fun to go to a library and check out a book than read these recovery strategies. But if you need some information in a pinch, you can go over here. I know right away to go click threats. And this table shows exactly the information that I was showing you guys about the way that those threats are kind of sorted. And you can take a look and see what level of concern. So looks like there's a whole bunch of mediums, a lot of habitat loss, bunch of invasive species. Ooh, apparently some collision with vehicles. Looks like that happens sometimes. Climate change is affecting. It is so widespread, and we really need to do a lot more research to pinpoint exactly how it's affecting a lot of our species, but it's affecting almost all of them, I would say. Yeah, thank you for that cool question, because now you got your answer and you got to see the species at risk registry in action. So good one. All
right. Thanks, Great Force. Let's grab a couple questions here from YouTube. And the first one here is, how, we can't go out and count every single member of a species. So how do we make those estimates? How are biologists kind of saying, okay, I think this species fits here? This is a really fun question. So this is where we get to do some statistics, which is not everyone's favorite. It's a lot of math, but I think it's really cool. It's almost like solving a puzzle. So there are ways of doing, we call them a habitat model. And what biologists will do is they'll count a number of the species. Maybe they're not getting, they know they're not getting all of them, but they'll say, okay, within this 5-kilometer area, we have this type of habitat and we have this many species. Now I'm going to go to another 5-kilometer area. It's a different kind of habitat, and we have some of those species, but there's way less of them. And so they do a whole bunch of these different counts. They're not crossing the whole entire country. They're just going, 5 kilometers is
I grew up in Toronto, and I always knew it as the distance. If you were to go from Lawrence Avenue to Eglinton and back again, like a major subway stop and back. So it's, you can walk it, you can drive it. And then what we do with those numbers that we get is we do kind of like a prediction almost, except for it's based in math. We get the computer to do it for us usually. And we're able to take an estimate of how many species are in a certain area, where they are. And if we do these studies year after year after year, we can even see how this changes over time. So my seasickness that I was telling you guys about, which is why I switched to not being on a boat anymore, but I had a really cool opportunity. I got to go, there's the Coast Guard and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans run this program where they circle Vancouver Island on a boat every single year, and they take samples of the water to see what kind of plankton are living there and get the temperature and the chemical makeup of the water. And they have been doing this for decades. So it's really cool. And it allows us to sort of feed this model with information that we've taken. And then the statistics helps us get bigger and bigger, so we can do an estimate of what's going on in the rest of the country. It's not perfect. It's not it's not final, but because we're using the best available science, we can be pretty sure that we've got a good idea of what's going on. That's a great question.
All right. Another one here quickly. Can you give us an example of a species that, another success story where a species has moved off the at-risk list?
Ooh, that's a really good question. It's been a little while since we've moved a species off of the at-risk list. But what does happen is that we'll move them from, so there's 3 different levels that you'll go down before you get to extinct. There's special concern, which means we're worried, we're keeping an eye on it. There's threatened, which means that there is, a little bit more of a risk. And then there's endangered, which is sort of that bottom category before it goes to extinct. And we've actually had a couple of maybe birds recently where they've gone from this sort of state of endangered or threatened up to special concern, which means we're no longer worried they're going to go extinct. We still need to keep an eye on them. We still need to manage their habitat, but they're not really in as much danger as before. And that's been happening more and more. And my coworkers have done this really cool project to kind of make sure that we're understanding why a species has gone at risk. And I mentioned that before, but what that also does is it lets us know if there's a species that was naturally rare in the first place, like there really weren't that many of them, we know that we're never going to take it off the at-risk list. And so we've started putting and so we'll sort of know that the target for that species will be special concern. And that's when we can kind of stop worrying about them as much. So unfortunately, I don't have an example for you of any of those species who are off the list completely. I know the butterfly I showed you, I know for sure is not off the list completely. But there are a lot of cases, there's maybe like 1 or 2 every year, where one or two every 3 to 5 years, where we take a species from endangered or special concern and we say, all right, we're no longer concerned about it being extinct. We're just concerned about it becoming endangered, and we move it up a little bit. So that's always really nice to see.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good indicator too that it is a challenging problem to bring a species numbers up and get them kind of off the at risk. So you kind of have to take those victories when you can, those steps where they become less threatened, less of a concern of going extinct.
This takes a long time. Conservation takes a really long time. It's on the order of, usually we estimate about 10 years to really see a difference. So a lot of what we do, we don't see the results of it right away, which is often disheartening, but it's important to keep putting the work in, and over time, hopefully stuff works out.
Yeah. All right. Sudbury, I think I see someone back up at the camera. We'll let you guys finish off if you have 1 or 2 to take us out.
Yeah, Con had a question.
Which species in Canada are you most concerned about?
Which species in Canada am I most concerned about? Ooh, that's a really good question.
Which one are you most concerned
about? I'm going to have to think for a second. I have to say, I really love owls. I think that they're really, really cute. And I think that they're really cool parts of the ecosystem. So I always get a little worried when an owl is on an at-risk list. Let's see, who else am I worried about? The first species that I was ever in my job involved in leading the recovery strategy for was the Western grebe. That's a seabird out in BC. And I got to lead that recovery strategy as the first thing in my new job because they eat herring, the fish, and that was what I did my master's thesis on. And they're special concern, so they're one of the ones where we're not as worried about them going endangered. But I keep a special eye on them for me personally because they were my first species that I got to help recover. So I don't know if that's a satisfying answer to your question, but it really made me think. And maybe you could think about seabirds and owls a little more too, because I think they're awesome.
All right, very cool. I am going to go with snakes because I think snakes are super cool. And so last summer I did see an eastern hognose and an eastern fox snake
Awesome.
in the wild, which is it's so cool to see things like that in the wild. And so I hope that we don't lose our snakes because they're super important, pest control and other things as well. Yeah, cool. All right, Mr. Dunscrew, do you have one more for us?
Just personally, I guess for my own, is
Yeah.
there a species out there that you can think of that, like, wow, I don't know if this is ever going to recover? Like, you're really concerned? Like, I don't think we can save the species. Is there a species like that in Canada that comes to mind?
I think what concerns me the most are the ones that we don't know about. So the cases where we've maybe only seen one or two of them, and we have absolutely no idea if there are only one or two of them, or if we need to do some more research to find out, maybe no one's just ever really discovered this species before. And so the ones I would, and again, this is not a very satisfying answer, and so I apologize for that. But I would say, yeah, definitely those ones where we just don't know. And I think another thing that I will say is a lot of the forest species are ones that I'm really, really worthy, especially the old growth forests, because those ecosystems take so long to sort of be created. And so any of those species that are endangered because they're in old growth forests, a lot of them are in BC. Once those forests have been logged, it takes them about 200 years to come back. And so I would say I would do a two-part answer because I'm a scientist and we like to say things in multiple parts. I would say definitely the unknown ones where I definitely want to do some more research. And I think me saying this as sort of my opinion of something that worries me because it's an interest that I have, not necessarily, I don't want you going and saying the government of Canada says this is the number one biggest threat. But I would, since we're chatting about it, I would say that I am really worried about old growth forest logging.
All right. Awesome. Well, Grade 4s, thank you so much for those great questions. Thank you to the Grade 5, 6s hanging backstage. The classes have sent us some questions via YouTube, and those who played Kahoot with us. Always awesome to have you with us. And Emma, thank you so much for being with us and finishing off our first series in the Our Changing Planet series. We'll have more coming in 2024, but we got to meet some great scientists, some great researchers looking in areas like the Arctic, our oceans, our waterways, of course, our species at risk. So it was really great to have you kind of wrap up the first part of the series, Emma.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much.
And Grade 4s, it was great to see you guys today too. Thank you so much for all those great questions. All right, we're going to sign off for today. Have a great weekend, everybody. And until next time, keep learning, and we can't wait to see you in a future event. Thanks, everyone.